Question 1. The performance metrics show a significant increase in Essity's market share in a key European region. However, a deeper analysis of the underlying sales data reveals that this growth is primarily driven by aggressive discounting strategies that are impacting profit margins. Considering the Essity hiring assessment test's regulatory framework, which of the following approaches best reflects professional and compliant conduct when reporting these results? Option A. Report the market share increase and the impact on profit margins, but attribute the margin decline to external market factors rather than the company's discounting strategies. Option B. Report the market share increase prominently, while briefly mentioning that the growth was achieved through competitive pricing strategies, without detailing the impact on profit margins. Option C. Report the market share increase prominently and provide a comprehensive explanation of the discounting strategies employed, including their impact on profit margins and the rationale behind this approach, aligning with Essity's strategic objectives and regulatory disclosure requirements. Option D. Focus the report solely on the market share gains, omitting any mention of the discounting strategies or their impact on profit margins to avoid presenting a potentially negative aspect of the performance. The correct answer is B. Report the market share increase prominently, while briefly mentioning that the growth was achieved through competitive pricing strategies, without detailing the impact on profit margins. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Essity, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory requirements regarding financial reporting and disclosure. The performance metrics, if not accurately and transparently communicated, could lead to misinterpretations by investors, analysts, and the public, potentially impacting the company's stock price and reputation. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing the desire to present positive results with the absolute requirement for factual accuracy and adherence to accounting standards. The correct approach involves a thorough review and reconciliation of the performance metrics against the underlying financial data and relevant accounting principles. This ensures that any reported figures are accurate, verifiable, and comply with the Essity hiring assessment test's specified regulatory framework. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it upholds the principles of transparency and accuracy in financial reporting, which are fundamental to maintaining investor confidence and adhering to regulatory obligations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting positive trends without acknowledging or explaining any negative deviations or underlying causes would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of transparency and potentially misleading stakeholders, which can violate regulations requiring fair and balanced disclosure. Another incorrect approach that involves selectively presenting data to create a more favorable narrative, even if technically not false, can still be considered misleading and ethically questionable, as it fails to provide a complete and objective picture. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or subjective interpretations rather than verifiable financial data would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it lacks the rigor and objectivity required for financial reporting. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, compliance, and transparency. This involves a systematic process of data validation, cross-referencing with accounting standards, and seeking expert review when necessary. The focus should always be on presenting a true and fair view of the company's performance, supported by robust evidence, and in strict adherence to the applicable regulatory framework. Question 2. To address the challenge of implementing a new customer engagement policy across Essity's global operations, which approach best ensures compliance with diverse regulatory frameworks and upholds ethical business practices. Option A. Implement the new customer engagement policy immediately across all regions to gain a competitive advantage, assuming that existing general business laws will cover any unforeseen issues. Option B. Prioritize the operational efficiency gains promised by the new policy, deferring any detailed regulatory review until after the policy has been in effect for a significant period. Option C. Rely solely on the advice of Essity's central marketing department, as they are most familiar with customer interactions and can adapt the policy as needed to local customs. Option D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment, including a review of all applicable data privacy, consumer protection, and marketing regulations in each relevant jurisdiction, and consult with local legal and compliance teams before finalizing and rolling out the policy. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment, including a review of all applicable data privacy, consumer protection, and marketing regulations in each relevant jurisdiction, and consult with local legal and compliance teams before finalizing and rolling out the policy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Essity, as a global company, must navigate varying regulatory landscapes while maintaining consistent ethical standards. The pressure to quickly implement a new policy without thorough due diligence risks non-compliance and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to balance speed with the imperative of adhering to all applicable laws and ethical guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that includes a thorough review of relevant regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data privacy and consumer protection in the markets where Essity operates. This approach is correct because it proactively identifies potential legal and ethical conflicts before policy implementation. It ensures that Essity's actions align with its commitment to responsible business practices and avoids potential fines, legal challenges, and damage to its brand reputation. This aligns with general principles of corporate governance and ethical conduct expected of large organizations. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the policy immediately without any review fails to acknowledge the legal and ethical obligations Essity has in different jurisdictions. This approach risks violating data privacy laws, e.g., GDPR if operating in the EU or similar regulations elsewhere, or consumer protection statutes, leading to significant penalties and loss of trust. Focusing solely on the perceived benefits to Essity's operational efficiency, while ignoring potential regulatory implications, demonstrates a disregard for compliance. This can result in legal repercussions and ethical criticism for prioritizing profit over adherence to established rules and societal expectations. Consulting only internal legal counsel without considering external regulatory bodies or industry best practices can lead to an incomplete understanding of the compliance landscape. This approach might miss nuances or emerging regulations, leaving Essity vulnerable to non-compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the objective. This is followed by identifying all relevant constraints, including legal, ethical, and operational factors. For a policy change, this involves a risk assessment and impact analysis, consulting with relevant stakeholders, legal, compliance business units, and developing a phased implementation plan that incorporates compliance checks at each stage. The ultimate goal is to achieve business objectives in a manner that is both legally sound and ethically responsible. Question 3. The review process indicates that Essity is considering a significant expansion of its product line into a new geographical region. Before committing to this expansion, what is the most responsible and compliant approach to evaluate the potential consequences of this initiative? Option A. Focus primarily on market demand and competitive positioning, with minimal consideration for potential externalities beyond immediate profitability. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify and evaluate potential environmental, social, and economic consequences, and develop mitigation strategies. Option C. Prioritize immediate cost savings and operational efficiencies for the new product line, assuming regulatory compliance will follow naturally. Option D. Rely on informal discussions with local partners to gauge the potential impact, without formal documentation or analysis. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify and evaluate potential environmental, social, and economic consequences, and develop mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's strategic objectives with its ethical and regulatory obligations. Essity, as a global company, must navigate a complex landscape of compliance, stakeholder expectations, and potential reputational risks. The decision-maker must exercise sound judgment to ensure that the company's actions are not only legal, but also align with its stated values and long-term sustainability goals. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough and objective impact assessment. This means systematically evaluating the potential environmental, social, and economic consequences of the proposed product line expansion. This approach is right because it aligns with principles of responsible business conduct and corporate social responsibility, which are increasingly expected by regulators, investors, and consumers. Specifically, it allows Essity to proactively identify and mitigate potential negative impacts, ensuring compliance with relevant environmental regulations, e.g., waste management, emission standards, and social standards, e.g., labor practices, community engagement. This proactive stance helps prevent future regulatory scrutiny, fines, and reputational damage, thereby safeguarding Essity's long-term viability and stakeholder trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without considering broader impacts is ethically flawed and potentially illegal. It risks violating environmental protection laws, labor regulations, and consumer safety standards, leading to significant penalties and reputational harm. This approach fails to acknowledge the interconnectedness of business operations with societal and environmental well-being. An approach that focuses solely on market demand and competitive advantage, disregarding potential negative externalities, is also problematic. While market responsiveness is important, it cannot come at the expense of regulatory compliance or ethical conduct. This can lead to accusations of greenwashing or social irresponsibility, eroding consumer trust and potentially attracting regulatory intervention. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or superficial research to gauge impact is insufficient and unprofessional. Regulatory frameworks often require robust data and evidence-based decision-making. This approach increases the risk of overlooking critical issues, leading to non-compliance and unforeseen negative consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured and comprehensive approach to impact assessment. This involves 1. Defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders and potential impact areas. 2. Gathering data through reliable sources, including regulatory requirements, expert consultations, and stakeholder feedback. 3. Analyzing the data to identify potential risks and opportunities and developing mitigation strategies. 4. Documenting the assessment process and findings clearly and transparently. 5. Integrating the findings into the decision-making process, ensuring that ethical considerations and regulatory compliance are paramount. Question 4. What factors determine the scope and depth of an environmental impact assessment for a new product launch by Essity, considering current and potential future regulatory requirements? Option A. A thorough review of all applicable environmental laws, regulations, and industry best practices, including potential future regulatory trends and Essity's voluntary sustainability commitments. Option B. An evaluation based solely on the environmental practices adopted by Essity's direct competitors. Option C. An assessment focused primarily on immediate cost savings and operational efficiency gains related to the new product. Option D. A reactive approach that addresses environmental concerns only when regulatory enforcement actions are threatened or initiated. The correct answer is A. A thorough review of all applicable environmental laws, regulations, and industry best practices, including potential future regulatory trends and Essity's voluntary sustainability commitments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Essity employee tasked with assessing the potential impact of a new product launch on environmental regulations. The challenge lies in navigating the complex and evolving landscape of environmental compliance, ensuring that the product not only meets current standards, but also anticipates future regulatory changes. Failure to conduct a thorough impact assessment can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions for Essity. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with environmental stewardship and legal obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of all applicable environmental laws, regulations, and industry best practices relevant to Essity's operations and the specific product being launched. This includes identifying potential emissions, waste generation, resource consumption, and end-of-life disposal implications. The assessment should also consider any voluntary sustainability commitments Essity has made and how the new product aligns with or deviates from them. Regulatory justification stems from the fundamental principle of corporate responsibility to comply with all legal requirements and to operate in an environmentally sound manner. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a commitment to transparency, accountability, and minimizing harm to the environment and public health. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on immediate cost savings without considering environmental implications, is an incorrect approach. This fails to acknowledge the long-term financial and reputational risks associated with non-compliance, such as fines, legal action, and loss of consumer trust. It also represents an ethical failure to prioritize responsible corporate citizenship. Adopting a reactive stance, addressing environmental concerns only when regulatory action is imminent, is another incorrect approach. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and proactive risk management. It can lead to rushed, suboptimal solutions and may still result in penalties for past noncompliance. Ethically, it suggests a disregard for environmental protection until forced to comply. Relying exclusively on competitor practices without independent verification of regulatory compliance is also an incorrect approach. Competitors may not be fully compliant, or their practices may not be suitable for Essity's specific product or operational context. This approach risks inheriting noncompliance and overlooks Essity's unique legal and ethical obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Essity should adopt a proactive and comprehensive approach to impact assessment. This involves establishing a clear framework for evaluating environmental risks and opportunities associated with new initiatives. Key steps include: 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory jurisdictions and specific environmental laws and standards. 2. Engaging with internal and external subject matter experts to understand potential impacts. 3. Developing mitigation strategies for identified risks. 4. Documenting the assessment process and findings thoroughly. 5. Establishing a system for ongoing monitoring and review of environmental performance post-launch. This systematic process ensures that Essity not only complies with current regulations, but also builds resilience against future environmental challenges, upholding its commitment to sustainability and responsible business practices. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate that Essity's marketing team requires deeper insights into consumer purchasing habits for a new product line, but current data access protocols are restrictive. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for actionable insights with Essity's commitment to data privacy and regulatory compliance? Option A. Directly access and analyze individual customer transaction histories to identify specific consumer segments and their preferences, assuming that the insights gained will ultimately benefit the customer through improved product offerings. Option B. Postpone any in-depth customer data analysis until a new, more permissive data access policy can be drafted and approved, even if this delays critical market insights. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of anonymized and pseudonymized customer data, ensuring that no individual can be identified, and that the analysis is strictly limited to understanding purchasing patterns relevant to the new product line. Option D. Utilize only publicly available market trend data and general demographic information to infer consumer habits, without attempting to access any specific customer data held by Essity. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of anonymized and pseudonymized customer data, ensuring that no individual can be identified, and that the analysis is strictly limited to understanding purchasing patterns relevant to the new product line. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. Essity, as a global company, must navigate varying data privacy regulations, and a failure to do so can result in significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The challenge lies in obtaining necessary insights without compromising the integrity of personal data or violating privacy principles. The correct approach involves a structured and privacy-by-design methodology. This means proactively embedding data protection into all stages of data processing, from collection to analysis. It requires anonymizing or pseudonymizing data where possible, limiting access to only essential personnel, and ensuring that any analysis conducted adheres strictly to the purpose for which the data was collected and within the bounds of applicable privacy laws. This approach upholds ethical standards and regulatory compliance, demonstrating a commitment to responsible data handling. An incorrect approach that involves direct access to identifiable customer data for broad market research purposes without explicit consent or a clear legal basis is ethically unsound and legally problematic. This would likely violate data protection principles such as data minimization and purpose limitation, potentially leading to breaches of privacy regulations. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the analysis indefinitely due to fear of noncompliance, is also professionally deficient. While caution is necessary, inaction can lead to missed business opportunities and a failure to adapt to market needs, which can negatively impact the company's performance and competitive standing. A third incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on aggregated, publicly available data without attempting to gain deeper, albeit anonymized, customer insights, limits the potential for strategic decision-making and understanding customer behavior, thereby hindering effective business strategy development. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the regulatory landscape, assessing the risks associated with different data processing activities, and implementing appropriate safeguards. This involves a continuous cycle of risk identification, evaluation, and mitigation, ensuring that data-driven insights are obtained ethically and legally. Question 6. Risk assessment procedures indicate that Essity's research and development team has identified a significant breakthrough in a new sustainable packaging material that could substantially reduce production costs and enhance market competitiveness. This information is currently known only to a small group of R&D personnel and senior management. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Essity's regulatory obligations regarding the disclosure of potentially material information? Option A. Initiate a formal internal review process involving legal and compliance to assess the materiality of the breakthrough and determine the appropriate timing and method for public disclosure in accordance with market abuse regulations. Option B. Immediately disseminate the information internally to all Essity employees to foster a sense of shared achievement and encourage further innovation. Option C. Inform key institutional investors directly and confidentially about the breakthrough to gauge their reaction and prepare them for the upcoming announcement. Option D. Delay public disclosure until the material is fully patented and production processes are finalized to avoid premature market speculation and protect competitive advantage. The correct answer is B. Immediately disseminate the information internally to all Essity employees to foster a sense of shared achievement and encourage further innovation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient internal communication and operational decision-making within Essity, with the stringent regulatory requirements for disclosing material information to the market. The pressure to act quickly on potentially market-moving information, while also ensuring compliance, demands careful judgment. The correct approach involves a structured and documented process for assessing the materiality of the information and determining the appropriate disclosure timing in accordance with relevant regulations. This approach prioritizes compliance by ensuring that Essity's actions are transparent and fair to all investors. Specifically, it involves 1. Internal assessment of the information's potential impact on Essity's share price or financial performance. 2. Consultation with legal and compliance departments to confirm materiality and disclosure obligations. 3. Adherence to Essity's internal policies on insider trading and market abuse. 4. Prompt and accurate disclosure to the market if the information is deemed material, following established regulatory channels. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the principles of market integrity and investor protection mandated by regulatory frameworks. For example, in the UK, the Market Abuse Regulation, MAR, requires issuers to disclose inside information as soon as possible, unless specific conditions for delaying disclosure are met. The process described ensures that Essity navigates these requirements diligently, preventing potential breaches of MAR, which could lead to significant fines and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to delay disclosure indefinitely based on internal speculation, or to selectively disclose the information to a limited group of stakeholders before a public announcement. This would constitute a failure to comply with the obligation to disclose inside information promptly, potentially creating an unfair advantage for those with early access and violating the principles of market transparency. Another incorrect approach would be to make a premature or incomplete public announcement without a thorough assessment of materiality. This could lead to market confusion, volatility, and potential regulatory scrutiny for misleading the market. It fails to meet the requirement for accurate and comprehensive disclosure. Finally, An incorrect approach would be to ignore the information and proceed with operational decisions without considering its potential market impact or disclosure obligations. This demonstrates a disregard for regulatory compliance and could expose Essity to significant legal and financial repercussions. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that emphasizes a proactive and systematic approach to information management. This involves 1. Establishing clear internal procedures for identifying, assessing, and handling potentially material information. 2. Ensuring that all relevant personnel are trained on insider trading regulations and Essity's disclosure policies. 3. Maintaining open communication channels between operational teams, legal, compliance, and investor relations. 4. Documenting all assessments and decisions related to materiality and disclosure. 5. Seeking expert advice when in doubt about the interpretation or application of regulations. Question 7. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a project team at Essity is developing a new product with significant competitive implications. To facilitate rapid progress, team members are considering various methods for sharing detailed design specifications and market analysis data. Which of the following approaches best adheres to regulatory requirements and professional conduct for Essity employees? Option A. Discussing sensitive product features and market strategies openly in a public coffee shop during a team meeting. Option B. Utilizing Essity's designated secure internal collaboration platform for all project-related communications and document sharing. Option C. Uploading draft market analysis reports to a personal cloud storage service for easy access by all team members. Option D. Sharing detailed design specifications via personal email accounts to team members who are temporarily working remotely. Correct answer is B. Utilizing Essity's designated secure internal collaboration platform for all project-related communications and document sharing. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient internal communication and information sharing within Essity with the strict regulatory requirements for data handling and privacy. Employees must understand that while collaboration is encouraged, the methods used must adhere to legal and ethical standards to prevent breaches and maintain trust. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement compliant communication channels. The correct approach involves utilizing Essity's approved and secure internal communication platforms for sharing sensitive project information. This is right because it directly aligns with data protection regulations and Essity's internal policies, which are designed to safeguard confidential information and comply with relevant laws. By using designated tools, employees ensure that data is transmitted and stored in a controlled environment, minimizing the risk of unauthorized access or disclosure and fulfilling the company's duty of care. Sharing sensitive project details via unsecured personal email accounts is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a significant regulatory failure, as it bypasses established security protocols and likely violates data protection laws by exposing confidential information to potential interception or unauthorized access outside of Essity's controlled systems. It also breaches internal company policy regarding the handling of sensitive data. Discussing sensitive project information in public spaces, such as a busy cafe, is also professionally unacceptable. This presents a clear ethical and regulatory failure. It creates an environment where confidential information can be overheard by individuals not authorized to access it, leading to potential competitive disadvantage or breaches of privacy. This action demonstrates a lack of diligence in protecting proprietary information and a disregard for the confidentiality expected of employees. Forwarding project updates to a personal cloud storage service without explicit authorization is professionally unacceptable. This is a regulatory failure because it involves unauthorized transfer and storage of company data outside of approved, secure systems. Such actions increase the risk of data loss, unauthorized access, and non-compliance with data retention and privacy regulations, potentially exposing Essity to legal penalties and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes compliance and security. This involves first identifying the nature of the information being shared, e.g., sensitive, confidential, public. Second, they must consult Essity's established policies and guidelines on data handling and communication. Third, they should select communication methods that are explicitly approved and secured by the company for the type of information being shared. if unsure. Seeking guidance from the IT department or compliance officer is a crucial step before proceeding. Question 8. The assessment process reveals that Essity is planning a new digital marketing campaign that involves segmenting customer data based on past purchase history and website browsing behavior to send personalized offers. While the marketing team believes this will enhance customer engagement and sales, there is a question about the explicit consent obtained for using this granular data for marketing segmentation purposes, particularly concerning customers in jurisdictions with strict data privacy laws. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation from a compliance and ethical standpoint? Option A. Proceed with the campaign, but remove any personally identifiable information from the data used for segmentation, relying solely on aggregated, anonymized data for marketing. Option B. Proceed with the campaign as planned, assuming that general terms and conditions agreed upon at the time of initial purchase implicitly cover the use of data for personalized marketing. Option C. Halt the campaign and conduct a comprehensive review of the data processing activities, ensuring explicit, informed consent is obtained from customers for marketing segmentation and personalized offers, and that clear opt-out mechanisms are readily available, in line with applicable data protection regulations. Option D. Implement the campaign and inform customers of the data usage through a general privacy policy update, trusting that customers will read and understand the implications. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the campaign as planned, assuming that general terms and conditions agreed upon at the time of initial purchase implicitly cover the use of data for personalized marketing. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating potential conflicts between internal company policies and external regulatory expectations, specifically concerning data privacy and marketing practices. Essity, as a global company, must adhere to a complex web of regulations depending on its operational locations. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that marketing initiatives, even those perceived as beneficial for customer engagement, do not inadvertently breach data protection laws or ethical marketing standards. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with legal compliance and customer trust. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Essity's marketing campaign materials against the specific data protection regulations applicable to the target audience's jurisdiction, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if targeting individuals in the European Union, or similar frameworks elsewhere. This approach prioritizes obtaining explicit, informed consent for data processing and usage in marketing, ensuring transparency about how customer data will be used, and providing clear opt-out mechanisms. This aligns with the fundamental principles of data privacy regulations, which mandate lawful, fair, and transparent processing of personal data and respect for individual rights. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the campaign based solely on the assumption that general customer engagement is sufficient justification for data usage. This fails to acknowledge that specific consent for marketing activities, beyond initial service provision, is often a legal requirement. Another incorrect approach is to rely on vague or implied consent, which is insufficient under most modern data protection laws. Furthermore, ignoring the need for clear opt-out options for marketing communications constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it infringes upon individuals' right to control their personal data and marketing preferences. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the relevant regulatory landscape for any proposed marketing activity. This involves understanding the specific data protection laws and marketing codes of conduct applicable to the target market. Subsequently, all campaign elements, including data collection, processing, and communication strategies, should be assessed for compliance with these regulations. Seeking legal counsel or data privacy expertise is crucial when there is any ambiguity. The process should prioritize transparency, consent, and the individual's control over their data, ensuring that business objectives are pursued ethically and legally. Question 9. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new, potentially disruptive product line is nearing final development within Essity's R&D department. This innovation could significantly impact the company's market share and financial performance. Which of the following actions best ensures compliance with regulatory disclosure requirements? Option A. Discuss the potential market impact and financial projections in a public forum, such as a LinkedIn post by the R&D lead, to gauge public interest. Option B. Await formal announcement by the Investor Relations Department after thorough review and approval by legal and compliance teams. Option C. Immediately share detailed project updates and projected market impact figures via internal company-wide email to inform all employees. Option D. Inform key suppliers and distributors about the upcoming product launch to secure early partnerships and supply chain readiness. The correct answer is C. Immediately share detailed project updates and projected market impact figures via internal company-wide email to inform all employees. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient internal communication with the regulatory obligation to ensure accurate and non-misleading public disclosures. Essity, as a publicly traded company, is subject to strict rules regarding the dissemination of material information. The challenge lies in identifying what constitutes material information and how it should be communicated to avoid market manipulation or insider trading concerns. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between routine operational updates and information that could reasonably influence an investor's decision. The correct approach involves a structured review process that prioritizes accuracy and compliance. This means that any communication regarding potential product innovations or significant market shifts within Essity must first be vetted by the appropriate compliance and legal teams. These teams are equipped to assess the materiality of the information, determine the appropriate disclosure channels, e.g., press release, regulatory filing, and ensure that the language used is precise and avoids speculation. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate fair and timely disclosure of material non-public information to prevent unfair advantages and maintain market integrity. An incorrect approach would be to disseminate information about potential product innovations directly through internal team chats or informal emails without prior review. This bypasses the established compliance protocols and creates a significant risk of selective disclosure or premature release of information that has not been properly assessed for its market impact. Such actions could lead to accusations of market manipulation or insider trading, as individuals with early access to this information might be perceived to have an unfair advantage. Another incorrect approach is to delay communication of potentially material information indefinitely, even after it has been confirmed internally. This can also be problematic, as regulators expect timely disclosure of information that could affect share prices. Waiting too long can create an information vacuum that may be filled by speculation, leading to market volatility. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's disclosure policy and relevant securities regulations. When in doubt about the materiality of information or the appropriate communication channel, professionals should err on the side of caution and consult with their compliance or legal department. This proactive engagement ensures that all communications are compliant, accurate, and contribute to a fair and transparent market. Question 10. Risk assessment procedures indicate that Essity's global operations involve the collection and processing of sensitive customer and employee data. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with data protection regulations and ethical data handling practices? Option A. Focusing security efforts primarily on preventing external cyber attacks with minimal attention to internal data handling procedures. Option B. Relying on the IT department to independently manage all data security risks without direct input from other business units. Option C. Adopting a reactive approach, addressing data breaches only after they have occurred and been reported. Option D. Implementing a comprehensive risk-based data security strategy that includes regular vulnerability assessments, employee training on data privacy, and a robust incident response plan. The correct answer is D. Implementing a comprehensive risk-based data security strategy that includes regular vulnerability assessments, employee training on data privacy, and a robust incident response plan. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's operational needs with its legal and ethical obligations regarding data privacy and security. Essity, as a global company, must navigate a complex web of regulations, and a failure to do so can result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The core of the challenge lies in implementing robust risk assessment procedures that are both comprehensive and practical, ensuring that potential threats are identified and mitigated effectively without unduly hindering business operations. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic identification and evaluation of potential data security risks across all of Essity's operations. This includes understanding the types of data processed, the systems used, and the potential vulnerabilities. Following this, a prioritized plan for mitigation, including technical controls, employee training, and incident response protocols, must be developed and implemented. This approach aligns with general principles of data protection and cybersecurity best practices, which are often codified in regulations like GDPR, if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, or similar data privacy laws. The ethical imperative is to protect sensitive information, and the regulatory justification stems from the duty of care owed to individuals whose data is processed. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on reactive measures, addressing security breaches only after they occur. This is ethically deficient, as it demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to adequately protect data, potentially leading to harm to individuals. From a regulatory standpoint, this reactive stance often falls short of compliance requirements that mandate preventative measures and ongoing risk management. Another incorrect approach is to implement security measures without a clear understanding of the specific risks faced by Essity. This could lead to misallocation of resources, focusing on threats that are less likely or less impactful, while leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. This is inefficient and potentially non-compliant, as regulations typically require a risk-based approach to data protection. A further incorrect approach is to delegate the entire responsibility for risk assessment and mitigation to external IT vendors without adequate internal oversight or understanding of the processes. While outsourcing can be beneficial, ultimate accountability for data protection remains with Essity. A lack of internal engagement and understanding can lead to gaps in security and compliance, as the company may not be fully aware of the controls in place or their effectiveness. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This begins with defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all relevant data assets and processing activities. Next, potential threats and vulnerabilities are identified, followed by an assessment of the likelihood and impact of these risks. Based on this evaluation, appropriate mitigation strategies are developed and implemented, with ongoing monitoring and review to ensure effectiveness and adapt to evolving threats. This systematic process ensures that Essity can make informed decisions about resource allocation and prioritize security measures that offer the greatest protection. Question 11. Compliance review shows that Essity's upcoming digital marketing campaign for new product may not fully align with the data privacy and consumer protection regulations stipulated by the Essity hiring assessment tests governing jurisdiction. Specifically, concerns have been raised regarding the clarity of consent mechanisms for data collection and the scope of data usage for personalized advertising. Which of the following actions should Essity's marketing and compliance teams prioritize to ensure regulatory adherence? Option A. Instruct the marketing team to make minor edits to the consent notices to appear more compliant, without a full review of the underlying data processing activities. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the campaign's data collection and usage practices against the specific requirements of the Essity hiring assessment tests designated regulatory framework, making necessary adjustments to consent language and data processing protocols before launch. Option C. Focus solely on optimizing the campaign's creative elements and targeting, deferring any detailed data privacy compliance checks until after the campaign has concluded. Option D. Proceed with the campaign as planned, assuming current marketing practices are compliant, and address any potential issues if they arise post-launch. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the campaign's data collection and usage practices against the specific requirements of the Essity hiring assessment tests designated regulatory framework, making necessary adjustments to consent language and data processing protocols before launch. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Essity's compliance team to navigate potential conflicts between internal company policies and external regulatory expectations, specifically concerning data privacy and marketing practices. The core difficulty lies in interpreting the nuances of the specified regulatory framework and applying them to a real-world marketing campaign, ensuring both effectiveness and adherence to legal obligations. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with the imperative of regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Essity marketing campaign materials against the specific requirements of the Essity hiring assessment tests designated regulatory framework. This means meticulously checking if consent mechanisms for data collection and usage align with stipulated consent standards, if data minimization principles are observed, and if transparency regarding data processing is adequately communicated to consumers as mandated by the relevant regulations. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the potential compliance gaps identified by the review, prioritizing adherence to the established legal and ethical standards governing Essity's operations within the exam's jurisdiction. It ensures that the campaign not only aims for commercial success, but also upholds consumer rights and avoids regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the campaign without further investigation, assuming that existing marketing practices are sufficient. This fails to acknowledge the specific findings of the compliance review and risks violating the designated regulatory framework. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for potential legal ramifications. Another incorrect approach would be to modify the campaign solely based on internal marketing team preferences without consulting the compliance department or referencing the specific regulatory framework. This bypasses the essential oversight function of compliance and could lead to the implementation of practices that, while perhaps appealing from a marketing perspective, are not legally sound. It prioritizes internal expediency over external legal obligations. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to implement the campaign with only superficial changes to the data collection notices, without a deeper assessment of how the data is actually being used and processed in relation to the campaign's objectives. This approach is insufficient because it addresses only a symptom rather than the root cause of potential noncompliance, failing to ensure that the entire data lifecycle within the campaign adheres to the regulatory framework. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, fully understanding the findings of any compliance review. Second, identifying the specific regulatory framework applicable to the situation. Third, conducting a detailed analysis of the business activity, in this case, the marketing campaign, against each relevant provision of the regulatory framework. And fourth, collaborating with relevant departments, marketing, legal, compliance, to implement necessary adjustments that ensure full adherence to both legal requirements and ethical standards. Question 12. Stakeholder feedback indicates that Essity's recent sustainability initiative, aimed at reducing water usage in its manufacturing processes, has generated significant interest among investors and environmental advocacy groups. However, initial internal reports suggest that the projected water savings may be less ambitious than initially communicated externally. Which approach should Essity adopt in its subsequent communications regarding this initiative? Option A. Focus solely on the positive qualitative aspects of the initiative, such as employee engagement and process improvements, without mentioning specific water-saving metrics. Option B. Continue to emphasize the original, more ambitious water-saving targets in all public communications to maintain positive stakeholder perception and avoid concerns about underperformance. Option C. Publicly acknowledge the revised water savings projections, providing a clear explanation of the factors influencing the adjustments and outlining any revised timelines or strategies to achieve the original goals. Option D. Issue a brief statement confirming the initiative is ongoing, but avoid detailing specific savings figures until further data is available to prevent premature speculation. Correct answer is C. Publicly acknowledge the revised water savings projections, providing a clear explanation of the factors influencing the adjustments and outlining any revised timelines or strategies to achieve the original goals. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because Essity, as a global company, must navigate diverse stakeholder expectations and regulatory landscapes while maintaining consistent ethical standards. The core challenge lies in balancing the immediate financial implications of a sustainability initiative with its long-term strategic value and stakeholder trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any communication regarding such initiatives is accurate, transparent, and compliant with relevant disclosure requirements, avoiding any misrepresentation that could mislead investors or other stakeholders. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the sustainability initiative's impact, including its financial, environmental, and social dimensions, and then communicating these findings transparently to stakeholders. This approach aligns with principles of good corporate governance and responsible business conduct, which are increasingly codified in regulations and ethical guidelines. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of disclosure requirements that mandate accurate reporting of material information to investors and the public. By focusing on verifiable data and clear communication, Essity can build trust and demonstrate its commitment to sustainability in a credible manner. An incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term financial gains over accurate reporting would fail to meet regulatory obligations for transparency and could lead to accusations of greenwashing. This would erode stakeholder confidence and potentially result in reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. Another incorrect approach that exaggerates the benefits of the initiative without substantiation would be ethically unsound and violate principles of honest communication. This misrepresentation could mislead investors about the true performance and impact of Essity's sustainability efforts. A third incorrect approach that delays or omits reporting on the initiative's challenges would also be problematic, as it fails to provide a balanced and complete picture, thereby hindering informed decision-making by stakeholders. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory environment and ethical standards. This involves identifying all stakeholders and their interests, gathering objective data, and assessing potential risks and benefits. Communication strategies should be developed with a focus on clarity, accuracy, and transparency, ensuring that all claims are substantiated and that potential negative impacts are also addressed. Regular review and adaptation of strategies based on feedback and evolving circumstances are crucial for maintaining credibility and long-term success. Question 13. Strategic planning requires Essity to consider the most effective approach to ensuring compliance with the regulatory framework governing its hiring assessment test. Which of the following approaches best aligns with this requirement? Option A. Implementing the fastest and most cost-effective recruitment methods, with compliance checks conducted only if specific issues arise during the process. Option B. Prioritizing a thorough review of all applicable laws and guidelines specifically related to the Essity hiring assessment test and the jurisdictions where candidates are located, ensuring all recruitment processes adhere strictly to these mandates. Option C. Focusing primarily on the regulatory framework of Essity's primary country of operation, assuming it encompasses all necessary compliance standards for global hiring assessments. Option D. Relying on general recruitment best practices and industry standards, without a specific verification against the regulatory framework of the Essity hiring assessment test. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing a thorough review of all applicable laws and guidelines specifically related to the Essity hiring assessment test and the jurisdictions where candidates are located, ensuring all recruitment processes adhere strictly to these mandates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Essity, as a global company, must navigate diverse regulatory landscapes while maintaining consistent ethical standards. Strategic planning in such a context demands a nuanced understanding of how different legal frameworks impact business operations and stakeholder expectations. The core difficulty lies in balancing global corporate objectives with local compliance and ethical considerations, ensuring that decisions made in one region do not inadvertently create risks or ethical breaches in another. Careful judgment is required to identify potential conflicts and to implement strategies that are both effective and compliant across all relevant jurisdictions. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of all applicable regulatory frameworks, including those specific to the markets where Essity operates and the jurisdictions governing its corporate structure. This approach is right because it ensures that Essity's strategic plans are grounded in a thorough understanding of legal obligations and ethical best practices. Specifically, adhering to the regulatory framework for the Essity hiring assessment test means prioritizing compliance with any specified laws or guidelines for that assessment. This demonstrates a commitment to lawful conduct and ethical recruitment, which are fundamental to maintaining the company's reputation and avoiding legal repercussions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the regulatory framework of Essity's headquarters without considering the specific requirements of the hiring assessment jurisdiction would be ethically and legally flawed. This would fail to address the immediate legal and procedural requirements of the assessment itself, potentially invalidating the hiring process or leading to discrimination claims. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed and efficiency over thorough regulatory review risks overlooking critical compliance points. This could result in unintentional breaches of regulations governing hiring practices, data privacy, or fair treatment of candidates, leading to penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that relies on general industry best practices without verifying their alignment with the specific regulatory framework of the Essity hiring assessment test is also problematic. While general best practices are valuable, they may not encompass the precise legal mandates or prohibitions relevant to this particular assessment, creating a gap in compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant regulatory jurisdictions and specific legal requirements pertaining to the task at hand, such as the Essity hiring assessment test. This should be followed by a risk assessment to understand potential compliance gaps and ethical concerns. The next step is to develop strategies that demonstrably meet or exceed these requirements, prioritizing a robust understanding of the specified regulatory framework. Finally, continuous monitoring and adaptation are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and ethical conduct. Question 14. Quality control measures reveal a minor but persistent deviation in the tensile strength of a new packaging material being tested for Essity's premium diaper line. The deviation is within the acceptable range specified in the initial material specifications, but it is consistently at the lower end of that range. Which of the following actions should Essity's product development team prioritize? Option A. Adjust the product specifications to accommodate the observed tensile strength of the new material without further investigation. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis to understand the deviation, even if it is within specification, and implement corrective actions if a systemic issue is identified before approving the material for full-scale production. Option C. Immediately halt all testing and development of the new packaging material due to the observed deviation. Option D. Proceed with full-scale production of the diaper line, as the deviation is within the acceptable specification limits. Correct answer is D. Proceed with full-scale production of the diaper line, as the deviation is within the acceptable specification limits. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient product development with the imperative to maintain rigorous quality standards, especially when dealing with a critical component like a new packaging material for Essity's hygiene products. The potential for a product recall or customer dissatisfaction due to a quality lapse necessitates careful judgment and adherence to established protocols. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation of the quality control deviation, including root cause analysis and the implementation of corrective and preventive actions, CAPA, before proceeding with full-scale production. This aligns with Essity's commitment to product safety and quality, and implicitly with general principles of good manufacturing practices, GMP, and regulatory expectations for consumer goods, which mandate that products meet specified quality standards before release. This systematic approach ensures that potential risks are identified and mitigated, protecting both consumers and the company's reputation. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with production without fully understanding the cause of the deviation, assuming it was a minor anomaly. This disregards the potential for the issue to recur and impact product integrity, violating the principle of due diligence in quality management. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a superficial fix without a proper root cause analysis, which fails to address the underlying problem and leaves the door open for future quality failures. Finally, delaying the investigation or production indefinitely without a clear plan for resolution would be professionally unsound, as it hinders business operations and could lead to missed market opportunities without a corresponding assurance of quality. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and adherence to established quality management systems. This involves clearly defining the problem, gathering all relevant data, conducting a thorough root cause analysis, developing and implementing effective corrective actions, and verifying the effectiveness of these actions before making a decision on proceeding with production or product release. Question 15. System analysis indicates that a potential new supplier for Essity offers significantly lower material costs for a key component. However, preliminary information suggests this supplier operates in a region with less stringent environmental regulations and has faced past allegations regarding labor conditions. An Essity procurement specialist is tasked with evaluating this opportunity, which approach best aligns with Essity's commitment to responsible business practices and regulatory compliance. Option A: immediately reject the supplier due to the potential risks without further investigation. Option B: initiate a comprehensive due diligence process to verify the supplier's environmental certifications, labor practices, and adherence to ethical sourcing standards before making a decision. Option C: negotiate a contract that includes clauses requiring the supplier to meet Essity standards, but defer actual verification until after the contract is signed. Option D: prioritize the cost savings and proceed with the supplier, assuming their assurances of compliance are sufficient. The correct answer is D. Prioritize the cost savings and proceed with the supplier, assuming their assurances of compliance are sufficient. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for an Essity employee due to the inherent conflict between a potential business opportunity and the company's ethical obligations regarding responsible sourcing and supply chain transparency. Navigating this requires careful judgment to ensure compliance with Essity's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks, which are assumed to align with general principles of corporate social responsibility and ethical business conduct, particularly concerning environmental and social impacts. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough due diligence process that extends beyond immediate cost savings. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. By investigating the supplier's environmental certifications, labor practices, and adherence to sustainability standards, the employee demonstrates a commitment to Essity's values and avoids potential reputational damage, legal repercussions, and supply chain disruptions that could arise from engaging with an unethical or non-compliant supplier. This aligns with the expectation that companies like Essity operate responsibly and transparently, often guided by frameworks like the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights or similar industry-specific codes of conduct. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost reduction fails to acknowledge the broader implications of supplier selection. This approach is professionally unacceptable because it risks violating Essity's internal ethical sourcing policies and potentially any applicable regulations that mandate due diligence in supply chains, especially concerning environmental impact and labor rights. Such a failure could lead to association with human rights abuses, environmental degradation, or non-compliance with international standards, resulting in significant financial penalties, legal action, and severe damage to Essity's brand reputation. Another incorrect approach that involves accepting the supplier's assurances without independent verification is also professionally flawed. While seemingly efficient, this bypasses the critical step of due diligence. It relies on the assumption that the supplier's claims are accurate, which can be a dangerous oversight. In the absence of verification, Essity could inadvertently become complicit in unethical practices, leading to the same negative consequences as prioritizing cost over ethics. The professional reasoning framework for such situations should involve a multifaceted assessment. First, identify the core business objective, e.g., cost reduction. Second, identify potential ethical and regulatory risks associated with achieving that objective. Third, consult relevant internal policies and external guidelines. Fourth, conduct thorough due diligence to mitigate identified risks. Finally, make a decision that balances business needs with ethical and regulatory responsibilities, prioritizing long-term sustainability and corporate integrity over short-term gains. Question 16. The audit findings indicate that a recent marketing campaign by Essity may have inadvertently collected and stored customer personal data in a manner inconsistent with the company's data privacy policy and relevant data protection regulations. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the Essity compliance team? Option A. Advise the marketing team to delete any potentially compromised data and consider the matter closed, assuming no customer complaints have been received. Option B. Immediately report the potential breach to all relevant data protection authorities without conducting any internal review to ensure full transparency. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation to assess the scope and nature of the data collection, consult with legal counsel, and review Essity's data privacy policy and relevant regulations to determine the appropriate response. Option D. Publicly announce a potential data breach to all customers and stakeholders to preemptively address any concerns. Correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation to assess the scope and nature of the data collection, consult with legal counsel, and review Essity's data privacy policy and relevant regulations to determine the appropriate response. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential breach of Essity's internal policies and relevant regulatory requirements concerning data privacy and handling of sensitive customer information. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and decisive action to mitigate risk, protect customer trust, and ensure compliance with Essity's established procedures and applicable laws. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation with the urgency of addressing the potential breach. The correct approach involves a prompt and systematic internal investigation, adhering strictly to Essity's data protection policies and relevant privacy regulations. This approach is correct because it prioritizes the safeguarding of sensitive data, minimizes potential harm to customers, and demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. By initiating an internal review, Essity can accurately assess the scope of the issue, identify root causes, and implement corrective actions in line with its established governance framework and legal obligations. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining stakeholder confidence and avoiding more severe regulatory penalties or reputational damage. An approach that involves immediately notifying external regulatory bodies without a preliminary internal assessment is incorrect because it may lead to premature reporting based on incomplete information, potentially causing unnecessary alarm and diverting resources. While transparency is important, a structured internal review first allows for a more informed and accurate communication with authorities, if and when required. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the findings without further investigation, assuming they are minor or unsubstantiated. This failure to investigate potential data privacy breaches is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It disregards Essity's responsibility to protect customer data and violates principles of due diligence and risk management. Such inaction could lead to severe legal repercussions, substantial fines, and irreparable damage to Essity's reputation. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to rectify the issue internally without documenting the process or involving the appropriate compliance and legal teams. This lack of formal process and oversight is problematic, as it bypasses established control mechanisms, hinders accountability, and may not fully address the underlying systemic issues. It also fails to create a clear audit trail, which is essential for demonstrating compliance to regulators and for future risk mitigation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with acknowledging and taking seriously all audit findings, especially those related to compliance and data security. This involves understanding the potential impact of the findings, consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations, and engaging with the appropriate internal stakeholders, e.g., compliance, legal, IT security, to conduct a thorough and documented investigation. The process should prioritize data protection, customer well-being, and adherence to all applicable legal and ethical standards. Question 17. Quality control measures reveal a potential unauthorized access to a database containing sensitive employee information at Essity. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the responsible department? Option A. Attempt to resolve the issue independently without involving legal or compliance to avoid unnecessary escalation. Option B. Initiate an immediate internal investigation to assess the scope and nature of the potential breach, involving the legal and compliance departments, and document all findings and actions. Option C. Publicly announce the potential breach to all employees and stakeholders to ensure transparency. Option D. Delete the affected database records to prevent further unauthorized access without further investigation. The correct answer is B. Initiate an immediate internal investigation to assess the scope and nature of the potential breach, involving the legal and compliance departments, and document all findings and actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's need for efficient operations with its obligation to adhere to regulatory frameworks governing data privacy and security. The challenge lies in identifying and rectifying a potential breach without causing undue alarm or compromising ongoing investigations, all while ensuring compliance with Essity's internal policies and relevant external regulations. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate level of disclosure and the immediate steps to be taken. The correct approach involves a structured and compliant response. This begins with a thorough internal investigation to ascertain the scope and nature of the potential data breach, followed by consultation with Essity's legal and compliance departments. This ensures that any actions taken are aligned with the company's legal obligations under applicable data protection laws, such as GDPR if operating within the EU, or similar frameworks if operating elsewhere. The process should also involve documenting all findings and actions meticulously. This approach is correct because it prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical data handling, minimizing potential legal repercussions and reputational damage by addressing the issue systematically and transparently with internal stakeholders before external notification, if required by law. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disclose the potential breach externally, without a proper internal investigation. This could lead to premature panic, misinformed public statements, and potential legal penalties for failing to follow established breach notification procedures. Another incorrect approach is to ignore or downplay the findings, hoping they resolve themselves. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure, as it demonstrates a disregard for data protection obligations and could lead to significant penalties and loss of trust if the breach is later discovered. A third incorrect approach would be to conduct an investigation solely without involving legal and compliance teams. This risks overlooking critical legal requirements for breach response and notification, potentially leading to noncompliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the situation thoroughly, consulting relevant internal experts, legal, compliance, IT security, and then acting in accordance with documented policies and regulatory requirements. This involves a risk-based assessment of the situation, determining the potential impact on individuals and the company, and then executing a predefined incident response plan. Transparency with internal stakeholders and adherence to notification timelines, as mandated by law, are paramount. Question 18. Quality control measures reveal an anomaly in the data processing system at Essity that may have inadvertently exposed customer contact information during a recent software update. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the IT security team? Option A. Immediately halt the software update process, isolate the affected system, and escalate to Essity's data protection officer and legal department for a formal investigation. Option B. Inform the affected customers directly about the potential data exposure before conducting any internal investigation or consulting legal counsel. Option C. Attempt to manually correct the data anomaly without documenting the process or informing any internal compliance or legal teams. Option D. Proceed with the software update as planned, assuming the anomaly is a minor technical issue that will resolve itself with further system operation. Correct answer is A. Immediately halt the software update process, isolate the affected system, and escalate to Essity's data protection officer and legal department for a formal investigation. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational efficiency with its legal and ethical obligations regarding data privacy and security. Essity, as a global company, must adhere to stringent data protection regulations, which are paramount in maintaining customer trust and avoiding significant penalties. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and rectifying a potential breach of these regulations without causing undue disruption or compromising sensitive information. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate course of action that is both compliant and effective. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the identified quality control anomaly. This approach is right because it prioritizes a systematic and compliant response. It involves immediate escalation to the relevant internal compliance and legal teams, who are equipped to assess the situation against specific regulatory frameworks, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the data involved. This ensures that any potential data breach is handled according to established protocols, minimizing legal exposure and reputational damage. The investigation would focus on understanding the nature of the anomaly, the type of data potentially affected, and the scope of the issue, leading to a measured and legally sound remediation plan. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the anomaly without a formal investigation, assuming it is a minor operational glitch. This fails to acknowledge the potential for a data privacy violation, which is a serious regulatory offense. Such an action could lead to significant fines, legal action, and severe damage to Essity's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement broad, unverified corrective actions without consulting legal or compliance. This could inadvertently exacerbate the problem, potentially leading to further data exposure or violating other regulatory requirements related to data handling and system changes. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal the anomaly from regulatory bodies or internal oversight. This is a direct violation of transparency requirements and can result in even more severe penalties if discovered. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with recognizing potential compliance issues. Upon identification of an anomaly that could impact data privacy or security, the immediate step should be to halt any potentially risky actions and escalate to the designated compliance and legal departments. This ensures that the response is guided by expert knowledge of the relevant regulatory landscape and company policy. A structured investigation, documentation of findings, and a remediation plan developed in consultation with legal counsel are critical components of this framework. Question 19. Upon reviewing internal security logs at Essity, a significant data exfiltration event has been detected, potentially impacting customer personal information. The IT security team has provided an initial assessment, but a full forensic analysis is ongoing. What is the most appropriate immediate next step for the compliance officer to ensure adherence to regulatory requirements? Option A. Wait for the complete forensic analysis to conclude and a definitive report on the extent of the breach to be finalized before any external communication or notification is made. Option B. Issue a general public statement acknowledging a security incident without specifying the nature or potential impact of the data exfiltration, to manage public perception while the investigation continues. Option C. Inform senior management of the potential breach and await their directive on how to proceed with any notifications, prioritizing business continuity over immediate regulatory compliance. Option D. Immediately initiate the mandatory data breach notification process to the relevant regulatory authorities and affected individuals as per the established Essity policy and applicable laws, while continuing the forensic analysis to gather more precise details for the notification. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate the mandatory data breach notification process to the relevant regulatory authorities and affected individuals as per the established Essity policy and applicable laws, while continuing the forensic analysis to gather more precise details for the notification. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts between business objectives and regulatory obligations. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that Essity's operations remain compliant with the relevant regulatory framework, specifically concerning data privacy and security, while also meeting performance targets. A hasty or incomplete approach to a data breach notification could lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The correct approach involves a thorough and systematic process of assessing the data breach, understanding its scope and impact, and then adhering strictly to the notification requirements as mandated by the applicable regulatory framework. This includes timely and accurate reporting to the relevant authorities and affected individuals, as well as implementing remedial actions. This approach is correct because it prioritizes compliance with legal and ethical obligations, demonstrating a commitment to transparency and accountability. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of data protection laws that require organizations to protect personal data and to notify relevant parties in the event of a breach. An incorrect approach of delaying notification or providing incomplete information would constitute a failure to comply with regulatory mandates. Such failures can result in substantial fines, legal action, and severe damage to Essity's reputation. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to downplay the severity of the breach to avoid negative publicity, is ethically unsound and legally risky, as it undermines the principle of transparency and can exacerbate the consequences if the full extent of the breach is later revealed. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical remediation without considering the notification obligations, overlooks a critical legal and ethical requirement of data breach management. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Immediate containment and assessment of the breach. 2. Consulting internal legal and compliance teams. 3. Understanding the specific notification requirements under the relevant regulatory framework. 4. Preparing accurate and timely notifications. And 5. Implementing robust post-breach remediation and security enhancements. This systematic approach ensures that all legal, ethical, and operational considerations are addressed comprehensively. Question 20. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a data privacy breach if Essity's new marketing campaign utilizes customer data in a manner not explicitly covered by current consent forms. The marketing team is eager to launch the campaign next week to capitalize on a seasonal opportunity. Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to regulatory compliance and ethical business practices for Essity? Option A. Delegate the decision to the marketing team lead, trusting their judgment that the data usage aligns with Essity's general privacy principles and will not cause significant harm. Option B. Proceed with the marketing campaign as planned, assuming the data usage is implicitly covered by existing consent, and address any potential privacy concerns post-launch if they arise. Option C. Consult with Essity's legal and compliance departments to review the proposed data handling for the campaign against relevant data protection regulations and internal policies, and seek their guidance on necessary adjustments or revised consent strategy before proceeding. Option D. Immediately halt the marketing campaign and inform the marketing team that the campaign cannot proceed until new consent forms are drafted, obtained, and processed, regardless of the seasonal opportunity. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the marketing campaign as planned, assuming the data usage is implicitly covered by existing consent, and address any potential privacy concerns post-launch if they arise. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient operations with the imperative of adhering to Essity's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. The pressure to meet project deadlines can tempt individuals to bypass established compliance procedures, creating a significant risk of regulatory breaches and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that operational expediency does not compromise ethical conduct and legal obligations. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential conflicts between new business practices and existing regulations, and then seeking expert guidance to ensure full compliance. This demonstrates a commitment to regulatory integrity and responsible business conduct. Specifically, it involves consulting with Essity's legal and compliance departments to review the proposed data handling procedures against relevant data protection laws and internal policies. This ensures that any new processes are designed with compliance at their core, mitigating risks before they materialize. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the ethical duty to operate within legal boundaries, safeguarding both Essity and its stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the new data handling methods without proper review, assuming they are compliant. This failure to conduct due diligence exposes Essity to significant legal penalties and reputational harm if the practices are found to violate data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize the project deadline over compliance concerns, rationalizing that any issues can be addressed later. This reactive stance is ethically unsound and legally risky, as it implies a willingness to operate in a non-compliant manner, even temporarily. Such an approach disregards the fundamental principle that compliance is not optional and must be integrated into all business activities from inception. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and compliance. This involves 1. Identifying potential compliance risks associated with any new initiative. 2. Consulting with relevant internal experts, legal, compliance, IT security, to understand regulatory requirements and internal policy implications. 3. Documenting the review process and any decisions made. 4. Implementing approved procedures and establishing ongoing monitoring to ensure continued compliance. This structured approach ensures that business objectives are pursued responsibly and ethically.